Imagine a new kind of investing, a potentially life-changing way to invest that honors biblical principles, the kind of principles that you and I grew up with. Since 1994, Timothy Plan has made biblically responsible investing possible, offering mutual funds and ETFs that are filtered for biblical principles. Don't compromise your values. Invest with Timothy Plan. Ask your financial advisor or call Timothy Plan at 1-800-TIM-PLAN. Again, that's 1-800-846-7526 and discover what it means to be a biblically responsible investor. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing. Mutual funds distributed by Timothy Partners Ltd. and ETFs distributed by Foreside Fund Services LLC. As a paid testimonial, there is no guarantee of future performance and each experience will differ. Yep, it's time for another Memo Pod. Great to have you with us. And yeah, if you're all you can see is the crap there. And I know that's not a good word in some of you's homes, but this is my 4th of July shirt that I wore here. Can you see it? How do I need to turn there? Crap, that's due tomorrow. Thomas Jefferson, July 3rd, 1776. You know what would be appalling to me? Here's what would be appalling. It would be appalling to me how many students that I have in school would not be able to get that joke. In fact, I think I'm going to try that. I think I'm going to wear this shirt one day. And I know we're supposed to dress up, but I'm going to take one day and not dress up. And I'm going to give a quiz. How many of you get this? Explain it to me on a half sheet of paper right now. And I bet you and I both would be stunned at the number of kids that would not understand. You know what kind of alarms me right now? Kind of alarms me how many of you don't get this. So maybe you need to submit, either in the comments below or via email, why this is a funny shirt. It was kind of awkward at my family get-together for the 4th of July. I'm not sure my father-in-law got it. But he's like 6'4". He's a big dude. So I didn't push it. I'm not an idiot. Anyway, glad that you're with us. I need to make you all aware of this right now, just so you know you're going to not get a Memo Pod next week. Okay? I'll try to make it up to you in a following week with something just really nice. But here's why. Because now that I'm not teaching summer school, June is done. In July, my family, Jenny and I, planned a family road trip. So we're taking the family, renting a van, and we're going. Right before we do that, Jenny and I are going to go to Gettysburg. And so I'll have plenty to say about that, I'm sure, after we go to Gettysburg. I've never been there. I'm very excited about it. So we're going to do that. But then the family is all going to... I'm not taking the kids to Gettysburg. I want to enjoy that. And there's no way I'm going to enjoy it with them. It's too hot. All we're looking at is the field. All of that stuff. Someday, I hope that they'll appreciate it. We are not yet to that day. And so I'm going to appreciate it. Anyway, and then we're going on a road trip. And because of that, I just didn't want to take the computer and do work while we're on the family trip. Number one, because I want to be invested with family. And number two, I know how things are in the car with my family. And this was Jenny's idea, okay? It was Jenny's idea. We've never taken an actual road trip. We've flown places, but we've never gotten in a vehicle and ridden for hours and hours in the vehicle. I said, right, but you know what it's like driving 35 minutes to go to a nicer restaurant. You know what that's like. So I don't know about this 7 hours. But anyway, we'll see. We're going to go down the eastern seaboard and see some stuff. So I will report back. But because of that, there'll be no Memo Pod next week. Now, you will have a memo, those of you who are paid subscribers. You'll get the memo, and you will still get the Bible teaching that comes out. But as far as the Memo Pod, you will be Memo Podless next week. This week, couple things that I wanted to discuss. First of all, for all of us, let's talk a little bit about 2024, the presidential election. I understand right now that there's two different camps when it comes to conservatives. There's the MAGA camp of conservatives who say unfinished business, Donald Trump needs to be the nominee. We need a revenge tour 2024. And they are adamant. You got a group of them that believe that he was the rightful winner in 2020. And so this is making things right. And that needs to happen. Okay? Then you got another subset of you over here that are saying, thank you, Donald Trump, for what you've done in the past. We need to move on. Because you're too polarizing of a figure. We need independence. We cannot independence, as in a group of people who are independent in their voting registrations and all of that, their voter identification. And we need to win them, and you will not win them. And so we can't mess around with that. This is too serious of an hour. We have to move forward. So, depending on the two groups, if you're in this group over here, you're going to cite polling data that shows Donald Trump losing ground with independents. You're going to point to polling data that shows him losing to Joe Biden in a potential head-to-head matchup. Okay, those are the polls that you'll point to. If you're in this group over here, you're going to, and you believe this should be Trump's time, you're going to point to the polls that show him up 50% to 22% over the closest competitor in the Republican primary, Ron DeSantis, and say, it's over. It's over. We need to move forward. So let's take at face value that Donald Trump is the preeminent favorite for the Republican nomination. I want to tell you how I think he wins the nomination in 2024, the Republican nomination, not the presidency, wins the Republican nomination, and I want to tell you how I think he loses the Republican nomination. Because if we trust what we're being told, this is his to lose. So how does he win it? How does he clinch it? How does he lose it? That's what we're going to do here in just a second. For those of you who are paid subscribers and you get the full memo pod, after the break, there's two things that I want to dive into. Thing number one, I coined not that other people haven't had similar ideas, but I coined the acronym in a column I wrote not too terribly long ago, LTKA, that I am an LTKA activist, which stands for Leave the Kids Alone. Okay? And so I have an update on that front and a further appeal as to why people need to join this movement. Okay? And it's not restricted just to conservative Christians. Surely this is an issue where most all of us can agree. And I also want to get into, there was a bevy, a plethora, if you've seen Three Amigos, a plethora of Supreme Court decisions that came down recently, and the left went apoplectic. I saw Mehdi Hassan, who's on MSNBC, the guy railing against the out-of-control court. How can Congress enact a law and the president sign it and the court strike it down as unconstitutional? Who do these people think they are? It is amazing how the two sides have flipped. Conservatives for the longest time railed against the activist court that was out of control and doing all this stuff. And the left that was using the courts to advance their agenda, they're totally fine with it. Flip-flop. Flip-flop. That's what's happened. But there's so many different cases. I want to look at the affirmative action one. And I want to share with you what I think were the worst takes on that Supreme Court striking down racism in college admissions. Supreme Court says, no, racism is not going to be allowed by universities. We're not going to allow it. That is unconstitutional. And the left went nuts. I want to share with you some of the worst takes, and you'll never believe the number two and the number one worst take on that decision. Okay, that comes up after the break. But let's start here with all of you here on the Memo Pod. Let's start with President Trump, considered in many quarters to be a shoo-in for the Republican nomination in 2024. Now, that may prove to be the case. I'm not going to even at this point tell you which of these two camps I'm in. Some of you know. I'm not going to tell you even if I'm in this camp over, which side was it? Was it this side that was the we need somebody new? Even if I'm in this camp, and some of you may think that I'm in that camp, even if I'm in this camp, do I think that someone new will be chosen, or do I think it'll be Trump? None of that is necessary to reveal at this point in time. I will tell you, regardless of which camp I'm going to be in, I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk for Donald Trump. I don't. And I know what the polls say right now. I do not think it's going to be a cakewalk. I believe there's at least a handful of candidates, believe it or not, a handful that have an outside shot at the nomination. Now, for some of them, it's a very long shot. And I'll probably do a memo pod in the future that says how each of these guys or girls can win the nomination. That's not what this is, though. This is about Donald Trump himself. I think that, regardless of the fact that I believe other candidates have the ability to win the nomination, I think that Donald Trump largely controls his own destiny. I do. Now, I may not wish that that was the case. I may wish that this was a foregone conclusion for Trump, or I may wish that no matter what Trump does, the Republicans are moving on. I might wish either of those two things, but I believe the reality is that Trump will control his own destiny. So, how does he win and how does he actually lose the nomination? Again, I'm talking about the nomination for the Republican ticket, not winning the presidency. I think that's a different calculation. Okay? So, here's how Trump wins. If Trump is on the ballot, he's going to have the incumbent's advantage. That's what conventional wisdom will say. I think that what's going to have a larger say is the mood of the Republican electorate. If voters on the right are feeling vengeful, if they're feeling angry, that's going to be a Trump victory. Nobody is going to tap into that more than Donald Trump. The Biden administration continues to be an international embarrassment, and it continues to devolve and get worse and worse and worse. And because of that, there is plenty of reason for voters to be enraged. And I think Trump wins if his promise to be the embodiment of the right's retribution, if it sells. If he's able to carry forth the and he can discipline himself, and I think that's going to be a big thing for Donald Trump. If he can discipline himself into this whole "they hate me because they hate you" messaging, if he can tap into that, I think the anger and the emotion that sadly defines our politics today, I think it carries him to a much easier victory in the Republican states. I also believe that Trump wins if he is able to keep his showmanship that he exhibited in 2016, if he can keep that fresh, if it doesn't get stale with people, and I'm talking the nicknames, I'm talking the low energy Jeb, and just being able to take apart his competitors and appear to be the outsider, if he can keep that fresh. And here's what I mean. I saw this statistic out there. The number of voters for whom policy positions don't matter as much as charisma. Donald Trump once said it's all about the ratings. I mean, to the degree that it is, that's an advantage to Donald Trump. I don't know that it's an advantage to conservatism, but it's an advantage to Donald Trump in this election. If it's about revenge or if it's about ratings, I believe Trump is the candidate in 2024. That's how he wins. Remember those two R's. If it's about revenge, Trump's going to be the guy. If it's about ratings and charisma and humor and all of that stuff, then Trump wins the nomination. I'm not saying the presidency, the nomination. So, how does Donald Trump actually lose the nomination? Okay. So, like, political scientists, and I know they're a dime a dozen. I would technically be considered, because I have a master's degree in political science, I would technically be considered a political scientist. Right. So, take it all with a grain of salt. All right? I'm telling you, there's nothing up here that you all don't have yourselves. Just the way it is. The only difference is I have a piece of paper because I paid somebody to let me read a bunch of books and then write essays as to what it is that I read and pass some tests. All right? So many of you may have keener political sense than me. So take the term, the title of political scientist a little bit with a grain of salt, all right? But most political scientists will agree that when it comes to Donald Trump's biggest enemies, start listing them off. The swamp, the establishment, the left, the media, whatever it is. Biggest enemy for Donald Trump? Yeses? Right. Donald Trump. He is his own biggest enemy. I see ways that Donald Trump can lose. 3 ways that Donald Trump loses this. By the way, I don't know when this started, doing it this way. Like most people do three ways. And I used to be a 3 ways. But at some point, I got hooked on this. But then again, isn't this like the sign of white supremacy now? So maybe I shouldn't use that. I refuse to believe that this is a sign of white supremacy. It's the okay sign. But anyway, 3 ways. 3 ways, whichever you prefer, that Donald Trump can lose this nomination, and I believe all of them are within his control. First, he is, like it or not, the de facto leader of the Republican Party. That's what Donald Trump is at this particular moment. The odds that the opposition party, the Democrats, will successfully prosecute him and put him behind bars, I think it remains very slim. Because the optics alone, I'm surprised that Joe Biden has allowed it to go forward. Sorry, Joe Biden's not in charge. I mean, he's the figurehead. But whichever posse or group of people or person is actually running the show. Maybe we've got an Edith Wilson thing going and Dr. Jill Biden is the one that's doing it. I don't know. But whoever it is that's running it for the Democrats, I think they're making a little bit of a miscalculation in letting this go as far as it's gone. So I don't think they're going to continue to pursue it to the point of trying to put Donald Trump in jail. But if Donald Trump cannot stop giving interviews, he may end up putting himself there. Let me show you a little bit about what I'm talking about. Take a look at this.
So now that we've heard this recording, does that undercut what you told Bret Baier just a week ago?
I had, and I said it very clearly, I had a whole desk full of lots of papers and mostly newspaper articles, copies of magazines, copies of different plans, copies of stories having to do with many, many subjects. And what was said was absolutely fine and very, very perfectly. We did nothing wrong. This is a whole hoax. This is just like the Russia deal. This is like the fake dossier. The dossier was a fake. It's all been a big fake. Ukraine. We went through these things ad nauseum, and this is 7 years of this stuff, and now this one. And the one who's done it wrong is Biden. He has 850 boxes all over the place. Nobody even knows where they are. He's got many boxes in Chinatown, D.C. What are they doing there? And he's accepting money from China. He's got boxes all over the place. I'm covered by the Presidential Records Act. I'm covered also by the Clinton Sox case. It's a very important case. It's law. And we did absolutely nothing wrong. This is just another hoax. It's called, I would say, election interference more than anything else. It's a disgrace that they can do it. Next question. But everything was fine. We did nothing wrong, and everybody knows it.
You're not concerned then with your own voice on those recordings?
My voice was fine. What did I say wrong on those recordings? I didn't even see the recording. All I know is I did nothing wrong. We had a lot of papers stacked up. In fact, you could hear the rustle of the paper, and nobody said I did anything wrong other than the fake news, which, of course, is Fox, too.
See, that's what I'm talking about. That's not good. There's no reason for Donald Trump to be talking about this stuff, and certainly saying things like that, making this so much more difficult on his attorneys. And that was bad. This is not good. But neither is this.
Ever get this stuff, this back, would be please, could we have it back?
And they
please,
asked for that.
because they have no.
They did ask for it.
No,
and they said, "Can you give the documents back?"
And we were talking.
And then they said they went to DOJ to subpoena you to get them
Which
back.
they've never done before.
Right.
And in
But
all
why not
fairness,
just hand them over then?
Because I had boxes. I want to go through the boxes and get all my personal things out. I don't want to hand that over to Nara yet. And I was very busy, as you've sort of seen.
Yeah, but
I've been
according to
very,
the
very
indictment,
busy.
you then tell this aide to move to other locations after telling your lawyers to say you'd fully complied with the subpoena when you hadn't.
But before I send boxes over, I have to take all of my things out. These boxes were interspersed with all sorts of things.
I mean, it's getting to the point where Trump is going to have a hard time finding attorneys who want to continue to try, who are going to sacrifice their own credibility to try to defend him when he's constantly changing what their argument is. Does that make sense? Like they decide on a defense, but then Trump does an interview where he totally undermines it by something that he says. And so then the attorneys have to pivot and say, no, that's not what we were saying, and that's not what he was saying. And then they try to craft something together to make sense out of what was said and have a new defense. There's going to come a point where attorneys are either unwilling or at least unable to do that. All right? That's one way Donald Trump loses this nomination, if he doesn't stop giving interviews about stuff and trying to put himself behind bars. Number two, the second way is if Donald Trump starves himself of oxygen. Okay? I don't mean that like literally, although that too would prevent him from winning the nomination if he suffocated himself. But what I mean is politically suffocate himself. Go back to what we said is one of the ways that Trump wins. His charisma, his showmanship. That is his lifeblood. There isn't a person out there that believes Donald Trump is a policy wonk. There's not a person out there that thinks that Donald Trump, I shouldn't say that. There are some people, true believers, that think Donald Trump is always playing like 4D or 6D chess. But very few people actually think that Donald Trump is a strategic thinker. No, one of the things they like about him is that he's not, that he just says what's ever on the top of his mind. There are very few, if any, people out there that believe that Donald Trump is this paragon of presidential statesmanship. That's not why Donald Trump gets support. He gets support because he is charismatic and a showman. That's it. And he excites people on the right. They love to see him stick it to other people, whether those other people are Republicans who stand opposed to him, or whether it's Democrats, or whether it's the media. But I repeat myself, Democrats, media. Anyway, that's what they want. So when I see clips and announcements, Caitlin Collins, the reporter, had this story, this blurb, that Donald Trump is thinking that he's going to skip the first Republican presidential debate. Okay, I get why he says he's going to do that. I understand the theory behind it, because he is the front runner, so why let them attack him? Just let them tear each other to shreds. But those theories, that's based on an old school understanding of presidential politics. It's reserved for traditional politicians, right? It's reserved for somebody like Jeb Bush, who doesn't have much to gain by showing up for those debates. Or Joe Biden, if you're the Democrat. No, you're not going to debate RFK. What do you have to gain? Nothing, but you got a lot to lose. But the problem for Donald Trump is he's not like a traditional politician. He needs those debates. That's what gives him life. He needs to banter and he needs to bicker. He plays into his rival's hands when he takes himself off the debate stage. So if he does that and starves himself of oxygen, and I know he says that he'll hold another event. Do you think, and maybe Fox News would cover it instead of the presidential debate, but I doubt it. And I doubt that the other networks are going to do that. I don't think there'll be as much coverage of it. And especially if the other Republicans are landing body blows on Donald Trump, I don't see how he does stay out of it. But if he tries to, he could lose the nomination that way. And third, if Trump gets stubborn about COVID, and I think he will. So I think this is maybe the gravest threat to Donald Trump. It is not in Donald Trump's DNA to admit that he made a mistake. It's not. But enough is now known from the era of COVID about the medical establishment that Donald Trump himself empowered and enabled, that I think this is a time for an exception. If I was advising Donald Trump, not that I think he would listen to me, but if I was a political advisor, if I was running his campaign or advising his campaign, I would say, come out and read this statement. Come out and say, no one would have ever thought that the medical establishment would be so dishonest. And I'll admit, I didn't think they would be. I trusted them, and I made a mistake in trusting them in my desire to protect you. That's why I trusted them, because this was unknown, and I believed that these were good people with brains in their head who would follow the basic protocols, the basic scientific process for doing things, but power went to their heads. And so I'm telling you, my desire to protect you is as strong as it ever has been. But my trust in them has been destroyed. Just as your trust in them has been destroyed, it is time for a complete reset in the National Institute for Health and in the CDC. Elect me and you'll get that. Because I was the one who was burned. And so I'm going to go in and clean house. He says that. I don't think any Republican's going to touch him. I'm serious. I don't think any Republican's going to touch him if that became what he said. If he accepted blame for trusting the medical establishment, but then buried the medical establishment by saying, they betrayed all of our trusts, including mine, and if you empower me, trust me, I'm ready. I'm ready to go in there and clean house. Because I'm scorned by what they did. If his rivals make COVID a major issue in the primary, that's what Donald Trump has to do. I think his rivals will make COVID a major issue. Why wouldn't they? And if they do, this, I'm going to roll a clip here for you. This being Donald Trump's position isn't going to cut it. This is how he loses the nomination.
So it is a big part of that spending, COVID. Do you have regrets about how you handled that? Because some of your opponents are now running these loops of where you say you shut down the country.
We had to artificially close our country.
We did just the right thing. We closed it down. We understood the disease.
We closed the country down. We studied it. We learned about it.
Some people wish we never closed it down. We did the right thing. Everything we did was right.
All right. I just don't think that's going to do it. I don't think it's going to do it, and I think his poll numbers are going to drop, and I think he'll get more bitter about the whole thing. And when Donald Trump gets bitter, he digs in his heels. And I think that is the potential pitfall for him in the nomination process. So, look, the script is only beginning right now to be written. There's many more pages that are going to be written. And if there is one thing about politics, it's that it's unpredictable. I don't know what's going to happen. But to me, right there, that's how Donald Trump wins, and that's how Donald Trump loses the nomination in 2024. All right. Some of you aren't that into politics, so sorry, but it's significant. It impacts our lives. You let me know what you think. Is this Trump's nomination to lose? Are you ready? Which camp are you in? If you're a conservative Republican, which camp? The all Trump all the time, or time for somebody new? Do you agree with my assessment? All of that you can put in the comments right down there, okay? Or email me directly, peter@peterheck.com. That's peter@peterheck.com. This is unfortunately where I have to say goodbye to those of you who are free subscribers. Would love to have you give us a shot and try it out. Get the full memo pod. Get the memo that's sent to you each week, the Bible teaching that's sent to you each week. Just give us a shot. You can sign up at peterheck.com. You put your email address in there, and bam, it'll say upgrade to paid. And you can give it a shot and stop if you don't like it. That's it. And some of you have tried that. I will not be telling you if those that are trying it are stopping or not. That would be humiliating if they were stopping. But anyway, so would love to have you try it out. But if not, that's cool too. But those of you who are paid subscribers, hang on through the break. We'll talk about my LTKA movement, Leave the Kids Alone, and also the worst takes on the Supreme Court's decision relative to affirmative action. All of that happens. And remember, free subscribers, no memo pod next week. Okay? I'm on the road trip. Prayers appreciated. And I'll see you the week after that.
The Memo with Peter Heck.
Please patronize and thank all the sponsors of the Heck podcast, including McGonigal's Buick GMC, Terrell's Auto Service, Norris Insurance, Stevens Machine, Creative Financial Center, Indiana Right to Life, Tri-Green Tractor, the Indiana Family Institute, Hartman Family Farms, Liberty Financial Group, the Wyman Group, and J. Watson Creations.
Welcome back, those of you who are our paid subscribers, family. Yeah, it's family time, yeah. Okay, right down here, you see that? That's Creative Financial Design, CFD. I want you to go to the link that is in the email that I sent you. It's right there, the big banner ad. Click on it. And you can put in your information and you can find an advisor near you. It doesn't mean that you are bound to them by any stretch of the imagination. It just means that you're looking to contact somebody about potentially investing through them for values-based investing. You want to be a good steward of that which God has blessed you with. And that comes to your retirement accounts and all of that. Because you trust that if you are investing in companies that are not warring against godly values, that God will bless that effort to be a good steward. You are trusting that, and you're going to do that. And even if God, this is like the Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah getting thrown into the fiery furnace. God can protect us, but even if he doesn't, we're going to go on serving him, and that's your message. I'm going to do values-based investing, but it's not even there anymore. Why did I do that? That's cool. Anyway, even if I am not finding these earth-shattering returns for being a good steward, it's still what I want to do and still what I'm going to do. All right? All right, so let's get into this now. By the way, you help me out if you click and you fill that out. Why do I keep doing this? It's not, the graphic isn't there. I don't know. You help me out immensely just by getting some information, because it means that their advertising and their support of what I'm doing helps. Just fill it out for me. Get some information. You don't actually have to go through it, but maybe you'll find it's a blessing to you as well. That's what we're in this for, right? All right. So let's start with Supreme Court. It was a bad week for progressives and their culture war. And they're the ones that have launched the culture war. They're the ones that are constantly launching culture war attacks. To say that it was a bad week when the Supreme Court starts issuing all of that's a weird way to scratch your beard, wasn't it? Did you see that? I should have just done this, but instead I went at it with two hands. Like, what is this? Hey. Sorry. It was a bad week for them. That's what I was saying. The Pride Month was coming to an end, and then the U.S. Supreme Court issues a series of constitutional rulings. It guts decades worth of liberal court manipulations and things of that nature. What happened? It happens the week of the year anniversary of the Dobbs decision that undermined their right to feticide. It was just a very, very difficult week. And one of them that hit them the hardest was when the Supreme Court struck down the government's illegal attempt to transfer student loan debt from the person that borrowed and took out the loan to a bunch of third-party taxpayers that had nothing to do with it. That was a hard hit for them. It was a really hard hit for them when the court struck down the ability of LGBT persons to violate the rights of conscience of a business owner by forcing them, using the power of the government to coerce them into a particular message. That was rough for them. And then, when the court crushed institutional racism that had been enshrined in college admissions processes, just a punch in the gut, in the face, in the back of the head, all of it. So, The ruling comes out on affirmative action. We're not doing that anymore. We're not going to allow institutional racism against Asians or white people, but against Asians. We're not going to allow it anymore. Okay? And by the way, I've seen some statistics from people that say, oh, but wait a minute. You know, there were 40% of the admissions were Asians and only 5% were black. Okay, the problem is that it should have been 44% Asian and 1% black if it went on merit. That's the issue. The reason that 4% of Asians were denied was simply because they're Asian. You are turning someone away solely because of their race. That is the textbook definition of racism. And you can't get around that and be a logical thinker. So the left wanted institutional racism enshrined in admissions processes. For whatever reason you want to say they wanted it, that's what they wanted. It was the Ibram X. Kendi. The only way to fix past discrimination is current discrimination. That's what they wanted. And the court said, no, you can't do that. So let me give you, in ascending order, the 5 worst responses. First one, Elizabeth Warren. This is what she wrote on Twitter. An extremist Supreme Court has once again reversed decades of settled law, rolled back the march toward racial justice, and narrowed educational opportunity for all. First of all, no, and no. It was not settled law. It was always a controversial ruling from the court from, what was it, 1978, University of California versus Bakke? Was that 78? That's not settled law. I hate that phrase anyway. Rolled back the march towards racial justice. This whole thing was done to stop discrimination against Asian people, to stop Asian hate. It didn't roll back the march towards racial justice. It fueled it. And narrowed educational opportunity for all. No, it didn't. It said now anybody can get this position based on their merit. Anybody. But Elizabeth went on and said, I won't stop fighting for young people with big dreams who deserve an equal chance to pursue their future. I want you to imagine for a second O.J. Simpson. You know O.J., the juice. Imagine O.J. Simpson bemoaning the failures of the American legal system. I mean, a guy who benefited from it unbelievably, the failures of the American legal system. Imagine Bill Clinton calling out Donald Trump's moral character flaws. I'm not sure you should be talking about that, Bill. Or imagine one of the ladies from The View discussing the prominence of uninformed voices in our political discourse. If it wasn't for the prominence of uninformed voices in our political discourse, they wouldn't have jobs. So that's what I'm saying. That's the lack of self-awareness. Any of those examples, that's what's being exhibited by Liz Warren here when she says this kind of stuff. Remember, I wanted to get this right. It was the University of Pennsylvania, Harvard University, and the Association of American Law Schools. Those three, Elizabeth Warren, the senator, identified herself as an American Indian on forms that she submitted to those 3 places: University of Pennsylvania, Harvard University, the Association of American Law Schools. She had American Indian listed on her Texas bar registration card. Now, she is not an American Indian. We all know that by now. She's not an American Indian, but she lied about her race in order to use affirmative action policies to gain an unfair advantage in the hiring process. What she's saying is bad, but that she is saying anything is worse. If there is one person in the country who should sit this one out, it's Liz Warren. All right, let me give you number 4 here on the list. This is from the New York Times. Quote, the Supreme Court rejected affirmative action at Harvard and University of North Carolina. The major ruling curtails race-conscious college admissions in the U.S. all but ensuring, they write, that elite institutions become whiter and more Asian and less black and Latino. Do you remember when George W. Bush coined the phrase, the soft bigotry of low expectations? It is a sad but a perfect description of how so many on the left treat ethnic and racial minorities in our country. They don't expect them to be able to compete. I mean, that's what's written here in this statement. That's exactly what it is. The phrase soft bigotry of low expectations, it means that you have low levels of bigotry residing in your heart if you think that only one group of people are capable of, or maybe I should put it this way, if you think a group of people that they're not capable of achieving what another group of people are capable of achieving because of their skin color. If you really believe that, then you have a bigotry problem in your heart. That's what the New York Times is. This is them in black and white, indirectly admitting to everyone they believe that blacks and Latinos are inferior to whites and Asians and can't compete. That's crazy bigotry. It's the New York Times. Number 3, and I hesitate to say this because I've seen enough credible reports that tell me this is a troll account, that this isn't a real, this is a fake bot account. And if it is, I would gladly replace this one with another bad take that was almost equally as bad. But this one's really bad. Somebody named Erica Marsh, which again may be a bot account. And if it is, just delete this one and I'd be happy to replace it with one of the honorable mentions. But this is what was tweeted. Today's Supreme Court decision is a direct attack on black people. No black person will be will be able to succeed in a merit-based system, which is exactly why affirmative action-based programs were needed. Today's decision is a travesty. Okay. So, let's suppose for a second that this was a bot account. This was like a conservative who was saying things that a liberal would say so that then conservatives could point to it and say, see, this is what liberals think. That could be, which is why I would wipe it out and say this isn't one of my examples. But do you know that at the time that I looked at this, there were nearly 8,000 likes of that tweet? And I didn't scroll through all 8,000. But many of the likes, the vast majority of the likes, were from accounts that were obviously liberal, left-leaning accounts. You do know what she's saying here. I mean, blacks can never succeed if it's something that is based on merit. That is white sheets level of racism. That's what that is. That's Robert Byrd level of racism. Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan. It also is one of the most astounding ratios I've ever seen on Twitter. Number 2 and number 1 may surprise you. Number 2, worst take on the Supreme Court decision, came from a Supreme Court justice, the most recently appointed one, Ketanji Brown Jackson. She writes this dissent that is something you would expect to see appearing at Slate or some left-wing opinion site. It's not a judicial relying on precedent and addressing down legally, breaking down the legal reasoning. None of that was in there. It was all what you would expect to see in like a blog, is what it was. I understand that nobody to this point thinks that Brown Jackson necessarily is one of the court's most serious and thorough and thoughtful justices. Okay? I'm trying to say this in a polite way. But I want you to remember that Ketanji Brown Jackson was selected to her position on the Supreme Court after President Biden announced to the country that she was not going to have to compete for that job against 93% of the candidate pool. President Biden immediately eliminated 93% of the candidate pool by saying he was going to appoint a black woman. The moment he said that, affirmative action had taken place. He decided there was a quota on the court, it needed another black person, and it needed another woman. Black woman is what I'm going to pick. 93% of candidates who were qualified are now eliminated. That's not just affirmative action, it's typecasting, it's a quota is what it is. And maybe it's because she benefited from it herself. That's why she favors locking, as Clarence Thomas explained, her colleague on the court, locking blacks into a seemingly perpetual inferior caste. Clarence Thomas went on, it was a beautiful expose of her thinking. He called her efforts, quote, an insult to individual achievement and cancerous to young minds seeking to push through barriers rather than consign themselves to permanent victimhood. And what I can't believe is, like a lot of these leftists and progressives, Jackson somehow seems to miss the admissions statutes and processes that the court was reviewing. They actively discriminated against Asians, which is a minority group. They discriminated, those colleges did, against Asian applicants, preventing them from admission regardless of their merits. And Jackson's defending that? Bad take. But number one here on my list of the worst takes, one of the other Supreme Court justices appointed by a Democrat president, this one, Justice Sonia Sotomayor. Sotomayor gets up, reads her dissent, because she is fiery angry. And she spoke to society, directly urging colleges to use race in admissions in any way that they can. Basically telling colleges, find a way to ignore this court's ruling. And then she closed it by saying, we shall overcome. Okay, so Ketanji Brown Jackson's dissent was morally imprudent. But there is nothing that could compare to the embarrassment of the wise Latina, as she called herself, Sonia Sotomayor. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the whole realm of court watching and all of that, but there is a left-wing legal scholar by the name of Lawrence Tribe. Lawrence Tribe, big-time leftist, big-time proponent of leftist justices, loved Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Stephen Breyer, the whole lot of them. Elena Kagan, big fan. Lawrence Tribe, who is a big progressive leftist, some of his memos were leaked, in which he warned fellow liberals that Sonia Sotomayor was, quote, not as smart as she seems. Sotomayor wrote her dissent, claiming that she would prefer using feelings and emotions to determine the constitutionality of a law more than using the Constitution. Frankly, I think that is disqualifying. That you don't fit on the Supreme Court if that's your logic. You can't be there. We shall overcome. What is it that we're going to overcome, Miss Sotomayor? The Constitution? That's what we're going to overcome? The system of checks and balances? You're urging citizens to resist lawful authority. That's sedition. That's seditious speech. You would think in a post-January 6th world where the left can't go a day without discussing what they say was presidentially fomented insurrection, that they might themselves frown upon a Supreme Court justice fomented insurrection. But here she is, an officer of the government, appointed for life, engaging in a performative tantrum, encouraging citizens and institutions to skirt and disregard the majority decision of her very court. What is that? Isn't that insurrection-y in and of itself? I think in the end, this is the great irony, maybe Sonia Sotomayor herself ends up being the best argument there could ever be against race-based considerations in hiring for any job. Your thoughts are welcome. Peter at peterheck.com. That's Peter at peterheck.com. I lament that we are not going to get to LTKA. I'm looking at the clock. I can't do that. I can't go beyond that. I'm going to be over an hour if I get into LTKA, and I promise not to do that. I don't want to bombard people too much, but I had to get through those 5. That was something. So LTKA will save to another day. Sadly, the issue's not going away. Would love your thoughts in the comments below about the Supreme Court rulings. You can comment that way. You can email me directly, peter@peterheck.com. That's peter@peterheck.com. Keep your eyes open because information is coming to you, paid subscribers, on how you can gain rewards and benefits by referring other people to join our family here. Yeah, figured out how to do referrals, this guy did. Yeah, so it's coming to you very soon. You can earn yourself a free membership just by doing referrals. Awesome. Hope you have a great week without me next week, just the memo pod. I've got the memo still coming to you, all right? And the Bible teaching still coming to you. But you will be memo podless next week. I'll be back the following week, all right? Prayers for all of you, and you pray for me in the road trip, and I'll see you real soon. Have a good one.